You do not send a naval fighter into the heart of the Luftwaffe's domain. That was the iron law, unspoken, unquestioned, and carved from years of brutal air combat over Europe. If you were a British naval aviator in 1944, your war was not fought against aces over farmland and cities. It was a peripheral war of convoy protection and submarine patrols across grey Atlantic waters. Your American allies flew Hellcats and Corsairs, muscular, radial-engine predators built for the Pacific. You, in contrast, flew what the Admiralty could spare. Hand-me-downs, hybrids, aircraft the Royal Air Force no longer wanted. To the German Jagdflieger, high above occupied Europe, this hierarchy was gospel. They were the masters of the sky. They flew the deadly Focke-Wulf 190, a machine with the reflexes of a knife blade. They had been hardened on the steppes of Russia and the cliffs of France. British naval aircraft, in their view, were targets of opportunity, slow, cumbersome, predictable. And the latest one, the Fairey Firefly, with its long nose, huge greenhouse canopy, and second cockpit tacked behind the pilot like an afterthought, it looked ridiculous. Intelligence reports spoke of its modest speed, its reconnaissance role, and its limited threat. The Luftwaffe had christened it with grim amusement, Fliegender Sarg, the flying coffin. The message was clear. Naval aviation was a shield, not a sword. Its aircraft were not designed to duel land-based fighters, and a Firefly attempting to challenge the Luftwaffe in its own airspace? That wasn't a battle, it was a punchline. But in the eerie half-light of the Arctic summer, in the shadow of the most feared battleship afloat, one young man in the back seat of that derided machine was seconds away from witnessing the shattering of that entire belief system. His name was Freddie Williams. At 22, he was an observer, a naval airman whose world was charts, instruments, radios, and the calculations that guided naval gunnery across miles of ocean. He was not the one holding the stick. He sat behind the pilot, surrounded by dials, maps, and the bulky IFF set that pressed like a metal shoulder against his seat. The Firefly was built for his job: spotting, reconnaissance, coordination. A scalpel, not a dueling blade. Freddie belonged to 1771 Naval Air Squadron, newly assigned to the carrier HMS Implacable. And in the late summer of 1944, every waking thought aboard that ship revolved around a single name: Tirpitz. The 42,000-ton German battleship lurking deep within the Norwegian fjords was not just a vessel. She was a strategic phantom, protected by mountains, torpedo nets, smoke screens, and flak concentrations so dense they were nicknamed the Christmas tree. She tied down the Royal Navy simply by existing. Sink her and the home fleet would be unleashed. Fail, and the shadow she cast remained. But reaching her meant flying through the Luftwaffe. The valleys around K-Fjord were patrolled by experienced pilots in Focke-Wulf 190s and Messerschmitt 109s. Prior carrier strikes had been bloody failures. In the upcoming Operation Goodwood, the Fireflies were assigned a dangerous supporting role, skimmed low over the fjord, fire rockets and drop their single 500-pound bomb to suppress the Tirpitz's flak positions and draw fire away from the slower Barracuda dive bombers. They were the shield for the sword, a thankless, lethal task. And for a plane mocked as a coffin, it looked suicidal. Freddie knew the numbers. AFW 190A8 could top for 100 miles per hour. A Firefly, on a friendly day, could reach 316. The 190 carried a wall of machine guns and cannon. The Firefly carried for 20mm Hispanos, powerful, yes, but spaced wide on its large wings. The German machine was a cheetah. The Firefly, a draft horse with armor plates. As Freddie strapped himself into the cold cockpit leather on August 22, 1944, the roar of aircraft engines and howling Arctic wind surrounding him, He could feel the mockery of that nickname tightening around him. Fliegender Sarg, and the Luftwaffe was waiting to nail the lid shut. Implacable turned into the wind. Steel groaned. Deck crews hustled. One by one, aircraft were hurled into the pale air. First the Barracudas, clumsy and determined. Then the Seafires, naval Spitfires renowned for beauty, agility, and pitifully short fuel reserves. Finally the Fireflies, Freddy's among them. He felt the catapult hook lock, the abrupt stillness before release, and then the violent punch that hurled their 7-ton aircraft into the sky. Baldwin, his pilot, fought the controls until the Firefly steadied. They formed up and headed 120 miles toward the Norwegian coast and the fjords beyond into enemy territory. The landscape below was a monochrome dream of black water, white snow, and dark green forests. Beautiful and hostile. Radio crackles filled the cockpit. Nothing alarming. Silence. Too much silence. Then the calm voice of the fighter controller broke in. Bandits. Many bandits. 10 o'clock high. Angels 1-5. Estimate 30 plus. Freddy searched the sky. At first, nothing but blue. Then specks. Then shapes. Then the unmistakable silhouettes of German fighters diving, stacked in altitude, sun at their backs. Not a patrol. Not a swarm. An armada. Over 30 Focke-Wulf 190s. They had the altitude. They had the numbers. They had the advantage. The Fireflies had arrived for their funeral. The Seafires, brave but hopelessly outnumbered, surged upward to meet the attack. The sky instantly filled with twisting vapor trails, tracer arcs, and explosions. Formations shattered. Baldwin banked hard. Freddy felt his body slam against the straps. To 190s locked onto their tail. Tracers sliced past, orange lines that looked almost lazy until they cracked like snapping bones beside the canopy. Baldwin threw the Firefly into a skidding turn. The G-forces pressing Freddy into his seat and washing his vision with grey. The Germans overshot to fast. For a heartbeat, the lead 190 hung in front of them, framed perfectly in Baldwin's windscreen. What happened next was not in any naval air manual. Baldwin didn't run. He couldn't. Instead, he used the Firefly's hidden secret, its unexpectedly fierce roll rate. Powered by oversized, manually operated ailerons. He snapped the stick over. The heavy aircraft didn't lumber, it snapped. The Firefly rolled into position. Baldwin fired. The sound was not a buzz. It was a deep, concussive thump as for 20mm Hispano cannons spat explosive shells. Freddy watched as shells stitched across the 190's nose. The engine cowling burst apart in a violent flash. A wingtip spiraled off, yellow-painted and unmistakably German. The fighter rolled, caught fire, and dropped into the fjord like a comet. Silence. Shock. Disbelief? A Firefly had just killed a Focke-Wulf 190. The myth cracked, and every Firefly pilot in the sky saw it. Across the chaotic dogfight, something shifted. Firefly pilots saw the kill, and something inside them hardened. They stopped fleeing. They turned. They fought. The Firefly's supposed flaws became unexpected strengths. Its heavy weight made it harder for German fighters to force overshoots. Its stable design made it a rock-solid gun platform. Its Griffin engine gave it brute force torque in climbing turns. A single 1-second cannon burst could vaporize anything caught in its path. Freddy became Baldwin's eyes, his fear transformed into razor focus. Brake right. Now, a 190 dove toward them. Baldwin yanked the controls. Tracers tore through the air they had occupied a split second earlier. Freddy spotted another Firefly, McLachlan's, under attack by two Germans. It looked hopeless. Then McLachlan performed a suicidal maneuver, pulling into a steep climbing turn that should have bled all his energy. The 190s followed eagerly. but the Griffin kept the Firefly muscling upward. From above, Lieutenant John McComish dove in, cannons blazing. One 190 exploded in a fireball. The second broke away, shaken. Then a violent bang rocked Freddy's aircraft. A warning light flashed. We're hit. Port wing route. Baldwin checked the controls. She's still flying. Watch our 6 they fought on. The battle raged for 20 surreal minutes over the magnificent, deadly fjords. Fireflies improvised tactics on the fly, loose pairs, with one acting as bait and the other pouncing from above. German pilots, trained for individual dogfighting, couldn't adapt. One German ace, over 40 kills, made the fatal mistake of trying to outturn a Firefly at low speed. The British pilot held his nose steady, fired a clean burst, and the ace's fighter disintegrated. Another 190 tried to climb away and was hit from over half a mile, trailing steam and smoke as it vanished behind a mountain. By the time the strike leader called retreat, the sky was almost clear. 5 Focke-Wulf 190s confirmed destroyed, several more heavily damaged. Not a single Firefly lost. For the flying Coffin, it was a resurrection. With the fighter screen shattered and flak positions pummeled by rockets, the barracudas pressed their attack. They scored direct hits. Tirpitz was not sunk, not yet, but she was rendered unfit for combat. Operation Goodwood achieved its strategic goal, but the psychological impact was even greater. Luftwaffe reports described a heavy-to-seat British naval fighter with unexpected maneuverability and devastating armament. Recognition guides were quietly corrected. The mocking nickname was erased from briefings. And in the Royal Navy, the effect was electric. The fleet air arm, long in the roof's shadow, suddenly had proof of its worth. The Firefly squadrons became feared attackers. Over the Dutch coast and French ports, they excelled at low-level rhubarb missions, shredding locomotives, trucks, and shipping. Their cannon tore through targets with frightening ease. Their toughness let them absorb flak and limp home. German flak crews learned to dread the deep. Throaty rumble of a Griffin engine approaching low and fast. The Firefly had entered the war as a joke. It flew into history as something else entirely. Freddie Williams survived the war. He returned to Britain forever changed. The blinding Arctic light, the burning oil on black fjord water, the concussive thump of the cannons, these memories trailed him for life. He had been one thread in a tapestry of quiet courage. Men like Baldwin were Clacklan, and McComish, men who had looked ridicule in the face and fought anyway. The Fairey Firefly would go on to serve in the Korean War and in the navies of Canada, Australia, the Netherlands and Denmark. It remained in service into the late 1950s, but its defining moment, its finest hour, came in those desperate 20 minutes over Norway, when it overturned every assumption about naval aviation and forced the Luftwaffe to rewrite its manuals. Its legacy is not simply about roll rates, engines, or cannons. It is a lesson in arrogance, in resilience, in the hidden potential buried in machines and men. The Firefly was mocked as a coffin. Its pilots used that mockery as fuel. They climbed into the sky expecting to die, and instead earned a permanent place in history. If this story moved you, give it a like so more people can discover it. And if you want more forgotten chapters of aviation history, the kind where ordinary men defy expectations, consider subscribing. It truly helps. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and if someone in your family ever served. Their stories matter too. Thank you for helping keep the names of Freddie Williams, George Baldwin, and the men of 1771 Naval Air Squadron alive. They climbed into a machine the world mocked and proved everyone wrong.